but it's like 8 times before you actually get it. All right, now we're live. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining, or coming on and chit-chatting with me. I know you're a busy guy.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Tell everybody who you are, what you do.
My name is Brett Stanley. I am an underwater photographer and cinematographer, and I pretty much exclusively work underwater, shooting portraits and short films and feature films and all that sort of stuff. Anything underwater.
Okay. How did you get started?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I've been into being underwater since I was a kid. I was like, we had a swimming pool when I was a kid, and I'd stay in there until my eyes were basically bleeding from the
Of
chlorine.
course.
Um, and just making up games and all that sort of stuff. And then, I surfed back in Australia, and when I was 16, I got my scuba diver's license. And then that sort of opened up a whole nother world of being underwater.
Okay.
And then sort of fast forward probably about 20 years, and then I'm living in New Zealand. I'm a commercial photographer there. I'm doing advertising work and studio work and landscape work. But really finding that the industry was pretty cramped, and I wasn't sort of finding my voice, I don't think, or much of a place for me in that, in that sort of
Okay.
industry. So I was actually going through an old storage locker, and I found one of my old underwater cameras from when I was diving, and I would take pictures of fish. And I just kind of was like, oh, maybe I'll try do what I do in the studio, and maybe let's see if I can do that underwater. So I started playing with the camera, and I started to get some stuff that I liked, and then I spent a bit more time sort of building some equipment, because what I wanted to do, there wasn't equipment for it. So I built some housings for lights and triggering systems, and kind of invested a bit of time and money into working out a way to shoot underwater that was similar to the way I did it above water.
Okay.
And this was about 10 years ago, and the first sort of thing I shot underwater was underwater pole dancers.
Okay.
I'm into portraits. I like shooting people. Shooting fish underwater bores the crap out of me. So being able to take what I did above water, under the water, and have people really react to it and resonate with it, and had quite a few things go viral, which kind of gave me a lot of energy and motivation to keep doing this. And
Sure. I could see
little
that.
did I know that 10 years later I'd still be doing this and be still obsessed by it. Yeah.
Well, I know a lot of the people in the photography group that I run. One of the things that they're always looking for is kind of like how you said you've been doing it for 10 years. You didn't expect to do it 10 years. How long was it before it was like everybody knew who Brett Stanley was? Was it a year? Was it 5 years?
Honestly, I couldn't tell you. I don't know what
Okay.
everyone knowing who Brett Stanley is even means.
Okay,
It's
I guess when did you first go viral? I guess would be the better question.
yeah. So like I said, one of my first real series was the underwater pole dancers, and
Okay.
that blew up. So that was
Okay.
about 10 years ago. And it was a little frightening, actually, because I had been doing these underwater pole dancing shoots for maybe 6 months or so, and had the pole community quite into it. So a lot of my clients and collaborators were in that industry or in that community, and they loved it. So that was great for me. So I was really
Sure.
happy. And then overnight, it got picked up by media outlets. And so the next
Okay.
morning when I woke up, my website was blowing up, my socials were blowing up. I had an inbox full of requests to post and publish these images, and interview requests and all that sort of stuff. So
Okay.
I think that moment was really when I felt even just a tiny little bit of recognition.
Okay. All right, I could see that. Um, I one of the things that I have noticed, like you have multiple ways to be found. Like you have multiple websites, you've got Instagram. And one of the things that I like is you're very transparent about pricing. Now I'm sure that's different if it's commercial. How did you get to And I'm asking this because of the group, because the group is always asking about, like that next step, or, how do I handle this? How do I handle that? What a lot of the photographers that are more mainstream, and not even just like underwater, but more mainstream, have a tendency not to have any pricing on their website whatsoever. Have you found that that works in your favor, or have you found that it has nothing to do with your package pricing, just somebody knows who you are and they reach out?
It's a really, so pricing for me is a real black box. It
Okay.
is and there's so many different ways to come at pricing your work and how
Sure.
you display those prices and how you get people in. I am not a salesperson. I'm not really
Okay.
interested in sales or marketing. I'm
Yeah.
interested in creating images and working with people. What I kind of have learned over the years is that if you're the sort of person who's going to hide the prices from the website, then you're someone who's interested in the psychology of selling. You're
Right.
wanting someone to come in, be curious, and then hook them by using your techniques of upselling
Right.
or that sort of stuff. For me, what I'm interested in is people who want to shoot with me.
I
So
gotcha.
by putting my prices on the website, I'm already filtering out anyone who's not going to want to afford or pay those prices.
Sure.
I'm not in the market of upselling. So if they're not into that price, then they're not into that price. So they're not going to
I
book
like
with me
that.
anyway. So I feel like I'm
Yeah.
wasting people's time a little bit if I don't put the price and kind of bring them in.
No, I like that actually. I like that approach. Actually, it's one of the things that I've liked about following you is you seem very humble. I don't know if that's the right descriptive word, but you seem
Yeah.
like you've just decided who you are, and you're like, hey, here it is. Do what you want with it. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. To be honest, so I do live in Los Angeles, and I've been in the States for 10 years. And it's such a different approach to things because coming from Australia and New Zealand, we are very humble people. We don't talk ourselves up. We kind of talk
Sure.
ourselves down, if anything. And that's our culture and that's how we work. So coming to the States where everybody's talking themselves up,
Sure.
it's kind of confronting for someone like me who's like, oh, I don't want to do that.
Well, it's a
Um,
turn off. It's a turn off,
it
especially if
can
you're like,
be, yeah.
yeah, well, especially if it can be a turn off when you're like, hey, here's my work, here's what I enjoy doing. You want to do it with me, great. If you don't, that's fine too. But I'm with you. There's a lot of maybe the right word for it is competition. Like everybody here, just they very much feel like they have to compete with the next person. I'm just like, you know what? There's enough here for everybody. There really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
How'd you end up in California then?
So my wife, who's from New Zealand, she works in the film industry,
Okay.
and she's had a love of the States for most of her life, and had been entering the American green card lottery,
Okay.
which a lot of Americans don't know this, but you guys have a lottery outside of America for certain countries where we
Mhm.
can for free just enter and win a green card, basically.
Okay.
So she went into that for sort of 4 or 5 years and then finally got one. So
Okay.
about 11, 12-ish years ago, she applied for a green card, got one.
That's
And
awesome.
so we came over. Yeah.
Okay. Um, when did you shift from doing more in the way of still photography into doing the cinematography? Because it seems like your cinematography and motion has been like the bigger part of what you're doing. Like I noticed your Instagram seems to be more reels now than it is necessarily just photos.
Yeah, so they're kind of two different things. So the reels is a necessity
Yeah.
of that's just how social media is going. They try to
Yeah.
push more video. To be honest, I railed against that for so long because I
Same.
do like just posting an image and kind of going, "Here's this. This is all it
Yeah.
is." But and I think it was when they were doing the reels bonuses. I think once they
Mhm.
decided to start paying me to
Yeah.
create reels, I was like, "Oh, okay, let's do
Okay,
this."
fine.
And that's when for the reels, I quite like them now because they tell the story of the shoot, and I
Mhm.
think a lot of what I do is so fantastical to people who don't understand underwater that they kind of don't think it's
Sure.
real anyway. So a
Yeah.
lot of my time is spent convincing people that what I've done hasn't been done in Photoshop.
Sure.
So I really like the reel format because I can go, hey, here's some behind the scenes of us shooting this thing, and then here's what it looks like, um, the final image, so that they can kind of
Okay.
reinforce the fact that all this was actually practically done.
Okay.
Um, and I quite like it because I like telling the story of how we did this shoot.
That makes
One of
sense.
my most recent reels was from me and one of my partners, Hannah Mermaid. We were in Mexico shooting some stuff, and we were shooting on a shipwreck at 60 feet below the
Hmm.
surface.
I saw
Um,
that one.
yeah, so being able to show people what goes into doing that, rather than them assuming, oh, you guys just went down somehow and took a photo and came back up. But if they can
Let me
see the
see.
effort that goes into it.
I think I can actually present that. I can share my screen for that.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Let's see. All right, there we are. So, like for Hannah in this situation, does she have sinus savers in, or is she just so comfortable underwater that she's just utilizing the scuba tank?
Yeah, so she doesn't use sinus savers, and for anyone who doesn't know, they are silicone nose plugs. So she's so used to having water flooding her nostrils because she's been doing this for 20 years.
Oh, sure.
So she's just having the regulator in her mouth. She's comfortable just breathing through her mouth on that regulator. This to her
Second nature.
is exactly, yeah.
I gotcha.
And then there is another one there that sort of just under that one towards the left. Yeah,
This
that's
one?
another one. Yeah. So this was, you get a little bit more behind the scenes of us going out on the boat, and we can't do these shoots under the water like this without safety divers. So
Sure.
I'm on a regulator, I'm on scuba, but this is Kiko, who was our safety diver,
Okay.
helping Hannah to get into the location, and he's just off camera. So when I shoot, he's out of the way, and as
Okay.
soon as she says, "Let's go, I need the air," then he swims back in um, and helps her out.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that you put the photos in when you do your videos too. There's some behind the scenes I see sometimes. I'm like, but where's the photo? Like, we should.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the fact that you do that. So
No, and
another,
I kind of like, sorry, I kind of get
oh
frustrated
my
with
God.
those reels, and I think I think they do it as a way of getting you to go to their page because
And go to the next reel that probably has the
yeah.
photos in it. Yeah, no, I gotcha.
But for me, it's kind of like, well, I'm not going to follow you now. I'm not going to go and look at it because you've pissed me off. Yeah,
You sound like me. I've had that. We're like, go to part two. I'm like, no, I'm not going to part two. You should have given it to me in part one.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So for me,
um,
the reels are really just me giving a bite-sized version of this is how it's done.
okay.
This is what we do. Um, but the other half of your question was how did I get into the cinematography stuff?
Hmm.
And so what I kind of fell in love with, and I didn't really have a lot of interest in shooting video stuff,
Okay.
maybe sort of 5, 6 years ago. But the more I spent on time underwater, the more I was looking at these images I was creating. I was like, like this is just one snippet of all the amazing stuff that we did. And I started to want to create these worlds that moved and, showed
Okay.
off these sets that I kind of created. So I started getting more into the video world. And I have a tank here in Long Beach. My studio is here.
I
So
know
I
I'm jealous that you have a
decided
pool
to,
in your backyard.
yeah, it's nice. Yeah.
Sure.
But it's great because I can bring productions in. We can shoot in my backyard. I have all the equipment there, and it's actually
So you
taken
have all
off a
your
lot.
tools at your fingertips at that point too.
Yeah, exactly. And anyone who shoots underwater knows that there's always something that's gone wrong or something you've forgotten or whatever. So having
Hmm.
my whole workshop and my garage and everything here means that I can pretty much solve any of the problems that we're having
Right.
right there and then. Yeah.
Well, then that would have been my next question because everybody's always curious about gear. Do you have like a favorite go-to of like, because I'm sure you're like most photographers where you're like, hey, I have 12 cameras and I have all of these things. Do you have like that one go-to thing? Like if you only had to pick one thing, that would be the thing that you picked?
So, kind of the beauty and the pain of being an underwater photographer is that you can't have too much gear because it all has to fit into a housing that goes underwater.
Sure.
Um, And depending on the type of housing you've got, I have an Aquatica housing, so it's a hard metal housing as opposed to something like an Outex or an Ewa Marine, which is a soft housing.
Okay,
It's
I
only
have the
made,
Outex.
yeah, this is only made for one camera body. So if I change my camera, I've got to spend another 3 to 5
Sure,
grand on just changing that. So
sure.
I have recently changed from the Canon 5D Mark IV, which I loved and could have shot until my dying day, to the R5. So I've been dragged kicking and screaming into the mirrorless world. Um,
Do you
and whilst
regret it, or are you happy you did it?
I don't regret it, but I fight with it every day. But then I see
Okay.
what comes out of it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because I shot a whole short film yesterday on it for a client,
Okay.
at 4K, 120 frames a second, and it looks amazing. Um, and I can shoot stills on it. So this one camera fills both of my um, two halves of my business, really. So
Okay,
it's been good.
Crystal. Let's see, Miss Crystal, where are you here? So you prefer housing versus built for underwater? I'm not sure I fully understand your question, Crystal.
I think what she's saying, do I prefer a hard housing as opposed to a
Okay.
soft housing?
Yeah.
Um, unless she comments and changes that. But
Okay.
I do, yeah, I do. So I work with the Altex guys. I kind of work with them to
Mm-hmm.
kind of build awareness because I really like their brand. And
Same.
as a entry level housing, I really like it. It's cheap enough that you can kind of get it.
Yes.
You're not sure if you want to get into underwater yet. It fits any camera mostly, so it's great. But in terms of being able to use it for me at depth, 60 feet, that's
Mm-hmm.
not going to happen.
Right.
Um, and also, some of the controls sometimes get a little bit hard to use depending on
That's
how
fair.
you need to use it. So for me, a hard housing gives me the flexibility to go and shoot at 100 feet or in my swimming pool and
Right.
have access to every button exactly when I need it and know
Well, that
exactly
was
how
going
to
to be
do
my
it.
next question. I went with the Outex because when I got started with it, I was like, am I actually going to do this? And the cheapest hard housing for mine was like $1,800. And I was like, I cannot justify that,
Yeah.
which was why I went with it. And it's actually worked out really well for me. And, I'll use it probably till it dies. But with the hard housing, and mainly because I think I've only used one hard housing on like somebody else's camera, are there any frustration points with it?
With the hard housing?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah. I mean, out of water, it weighs a ton.
Okay.
It's when I travel with it, yeah, I've got to be. I basically take a whole other suitcase to take it and all the accessories.
Okay.
So in terms of convenience and ease of travel, it's not the best,
Okay.
but it pays off in terms of being able to do what I want to do and knowing that it's going to end up at the other end safe and sound because it's made out of
Sure.
metal. When I first started, my very first housing was an Ewa Marine bag. So
Okay.
it's basically like a Ziploc bag for your camera.
I think I know what you're talking about.
And then when I bought it, it was probably about $500, and that was about all I wanted to spend on this new weird style of
Sure.
photography.
Sure.
But it was great. It did exactly what I needed. And the only reason I eventually moved away from it was it ended up having a leak in it. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, and I'd already sort of had a business built around that housing that I could now afford to actually move forward and invest some money in something bigger and better. So,
I
and
gotcha.
I knew I wanted to do ocean work or deep water work, so I needed a housing that was going to kind of grow with me and grow with my business.
Okay. Now, I haven't done open water yet because part of me finds it moderately terrifying. But have you ever had, I know I see the smile on your face.
Oh, I get it. I get it. Yeah.
Have you ever had anything like scary or sketchy or anything along those lines happen while you guys were out on an open water adventure?
I've had a few things happen, but generally nothing overly scary or overly life threatening, mainly because I am a bit of a safety freak. I
Okay.
am, I am so focused on making sure that everything we do is safe and within the bounds of capability and all that sort of stuff, because I'm acutely aware of what we do is a place where we can die. So
Sure.
even in a swimming pool, people can die in there. So,
Absolutely.
and I don't want to be the poster boy for underwater photography deaths. So, um,
Understandable.
yeah. So I do spend a lot of my time kind of thinking about, I game out every shoot. What are the things that can go wrong? What are the things
Okay.
that we can do? But in saying that, I have had a few incidents where things have kind of gone sideways a bit. And one of them was really just, it came down to one switch on my camera that I can't access from outside the housing. And
Okay.
that switch being switched to the wrong setting.
Oh.
Um, and so this was in the Bahamas. This was probably like 60 years ago. And we were down at sort of 30 feet with sharks all around us. And we were doing some shooting there. And I get down there, we've got the models, all this sort of stuff. I'm about ready to shoot, but I can't focus.
Oh
I'm not able to
no.
actually pull focus on my camera. And I realized that as I put it together on the boat, I hit the manual focus switch and
Oh
now it's on manual
no.
focus. So I literally have to pull myself back up the line to the boat
Mm-hmm.
where the box of chum is that is actually attracting all these sharks by myself, drag myself back onto the dinghy, open up my housing, flick that little
Sure.
switch, and then stick my head back in and go, oh, wow, there's twice as many sharks now. So roll back in, steal myself, and then pull myself back down the line and do the
Oh my
shoot.
goodness.
So what I ended up doing when I got back from that was I ended up buying a new extension ring, which has a focus knob on it. So that can
Okay.
never, worst case is I now have to pull focus manually, but
I
that I'm
gotcha. I
never going to
gotcha.
have that problem again.
Okay. What would be advice that you would give somebody who wants to get started in underwater photography?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest advice I can give someone is you don't need a lot of equipment.
Okay.
You can, if you want to get started, buy whatever your budget allows to give you the functionality you need. And
Okay.
what I mean by that is that if you're just out taking photos or video of yourself swimming in a mermaid tail or in your backyard pool, get a GoPro. Use your iPhone, or whatever phone you have. Get a case for
Sure.
it. I shoot a lot of stuff just on my iPhone, stuff that makes it into my portfolio.
Hmm.
Um, you don't need to spend a lot of money, and I think people get sort of caught up in what they need to get.
Sure.
The main things that you're trying to do when you're learning underwater photography is learn how to move yourself under the
Hmm.
water, because you need to be able to be stable, not fighting your own buoyancy, so that you can actually do your job as a photographer. So learning how to control your buoyancy, learn how to get the shots, like what are the shots you're trying to get, whatever kind of
Hmm.
style of photography it is. All of these things are way more important than the gear that you have, because
Right.
you could spend $5,000 on a camera and a housing, but then still take terrible shots.
Yeah, no, I trust me, I get that. The first year I started attempting the underwater stuff last year and I couldn't get my butt to stay under the water. That's the first thing
Yeah,
I wanted to shoot back to the surface. And I'm like, there's got to be a way to do this. And then it was like 20 pounds around my waist. And I was like, oh, I can do this now. I was like, I
yeah.
can get down there. I can stay down there. That's great.
Well,
Now,
the other thing too is just being, if you can't, if you don't know how to control your body in the water, you're not going to be able to direct someone else who's going to be in
right.
front of the camera how they need to hold their body. So
Sure.
a lot of this is a lot of the reason I get the shots that I get from people who have never done this before, and 90% of my portfolio is people who have never done this before,
Okay.
um, is just direction, is being able
Mhm.
to explain to them how to be neutrally or negatively buoyant, how to stay under the water, how to pose.
Okay.
Um, Once you learn that, then you can concentrate on getting a great shot of that. But a
Right.
great shot of someone looking flailing around in the water is still not a great shot.
Yeah, no, I've been there. I've been there. I'm definitely still in the learning process. Probably will be for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
10 years, I'm still learning.
well, sometimes I think that's the best part about being creative, though, is I think that it's very rare that creative people get stuck, but creative people also go, okay, this isn't working. What do I want to do differently? How can I do
Yeah.
this differently? What makes me excited to do something new? I think that's the bigger thing sometimes, is not getting so stuck in a concept that there's nothing new happening that feeds that imagination and that motivation.
Yeah.
Um, Workshops. Let's talk about
Yeah.
workshops. You do a lot of workshops.
Yeah, so I do a variety of workshops. So in the last few years, I've been doing photographer workshops, which is for people who want to learn how to shoot underwater.
Sure.
And these can range from a few hours of online mentoring
Okay.
to personal one-on-one private tutorials. So people will come to the studio and we'll spend the day just working on what they want to work on,
Okay.
to whole 3-day group workshops. And
Right.
what I like to cover in the group workshops is everything from the beginner stuff, like how an underwater camera works, how physics works, how buoyancy works,
Hmm.
right through to lighting and post production. A
Okay.
lot of what I see people doing out there who are starting underwater photography is they might be taking nice shots, but they're letting themselves down in the post production world, um, or they've got good post production, but they're not taking photos that are clean enough to give them the most options when they are sort of
Sure.
doing the editing.
That reminds me, because I hadn't asked this question yet. Is your home pool a saltwater pool?
So it used to be a saltwater pool
Okay.
when I built it,
Mhm.
and so for those who don't know, there's colloquially called saltwater pools and chlorine pools, but they're actually
Mhm.
both chlorine pools. So
Okay.
they both have chlorine in them. They can both burn your eyes if they are not maintained properly. So there is a kind of a preconception that saltwater pools are better,
Hmm.
but it is a yes but kind of situation.
Okay.
So I had a saltwater pool for maybe 3 years, and
Hmm.
I did love the saltwater. It was great, but the saltwater generator so the way saltwater works is that there's salt in the water. It gets filtered through an electrode, and that electrode breaks the particles apart and creates chlorine. So you
Hmm.
don't need to add chlorine to the pool; it's already doing
I
it
gotcha.
for you. And that process does make a milder kind of chlorine. So it feels nicer to be in the water. But
Okay.
also, salt water is similar to your eyes. So it doesn't potentially sting as much because now you have just, salty tears in your eyes. So
Okay.
it can kind of feel nicer. Um, but living in California, I have a lot of evaporation. So the water
Okay.
here becomes harder and harder because the water's evaporating, but the minerals are left behind.
Okay. I see.
So all the salt and all the calcium and all that sort of stuff is in there. It's getting harder and harder. And so when I would get out of the pool after a shoot, I would be dry and my skin would be starting to crack. And
Okay.
so I spoke to my pool guy and I was like, what can we do about that? And he's like, the only thing you can do is drain it. So take all the
Okay.
water out of it and start again.
Hmm.
And at that point, I had said to him, because there was problems with our saltwater generator, it wasn't really working very well. So he was having to add chlorine anyway. So I said,
Okay.
is it worth me putting the salt back in? And he said, to be honest, it's going to be easier and cheaper to maintain if you don't put the salt water back in.
Okay.
So what I did was we drained it, I filled it back up, and it is now just a chlorine pool.
Okay.
And to be honest, I wouldn't know the difference. It's still
Interesting.
just as clear. It's just as nice on people's skin and eyes,
Oh,
without
I
all the
guess
extra
my
chemicals.
question for you would be is, so I mean, I'm on the East Coast,
Mhm.
but one of the things that I've noticed here, I've rented a couple of pools through Swimply. I've had access to a couple of pools. Most of the chlorine pools here are pretty murky. The saltwater ones seem to have so much more clarity. Now, I don't know if that's how the person manages their pool, or if it's the difference between the two.
So the difference there is, you might have just lucked out and got someone who's
Okay.
looking after their pool well.
Okay.
If they are looking after the pH, the balance, and cleaning it regularly, then it's going to be clear. It's going to be a
Okay.
clear pool.
Okay.
But in saying that, some people only have a pool guy come around once once every week or 2 weeks. And
Mhm.
over that time, the chlorine is evaporating. So by the time it gets to close to them coming back again, there might be zero chlorine in there, and the algae
Okay.
has started to bloom. The beauty
Interesting.
of a saltwater pool is that it's constantly adding chlorine to itself.
I
So it's
gotcha.
almost an automatic process. So that is one of the benefits of it, is that it can keep it cleaner.
Okay.
What I
Okay.
would say, because I did spend probably the first half of my career renting pools through places like Swimply and Airbnb,
Mhm.
um, is that if you see a swimming pool and it has a vacuum in the bottom of it going around, it's going to be cleaner than one that doesn't.
Okay.
Because what happens is all the debris and all the extra bits of chlorine and anything that's coming into that pool is going to settle to the bottom. So
Okay.
when you first get in, it's going to look nice and clean until you kick everything up, and then it's going to get all murky and kind of horrible.
Sure.
But
Okay, that makes
if they
sense.
have the vacuum in there, it's sucking all that stuff up constantly.
I
So
gotcha.
the reason that my pool here is crystal clear, I can see like directly from one side to the other, is that I have a vacuum in there 24/7.
I gotcha. That makes sense. See, I learned something today.
Yay, that's why we're here.
um, so the other thing that you do event-wise, Mermagicon, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I do. I'm quite involved in the mermaid community, which is just getting bigger and bigger every year.
Every
And so
year.
they have conventions. So there's one on the East Coast called Mermagicon. There's one on the West Coast called the California Mermaid Convention, and there are other ones as well, and more popping up. So what I do, and kind of the first half of my career was doing this, was traveling and setting up shoots.
Okay.
So the way I first started was I didn't have a swimming pool in New Zealand, so I would rent the local public swimming pool and block it out for 5-6 hours and let people book a slot
Sure.
in that.
Sure.
So that's what I do at these conventions. Is I will have a corner of the pool, and I'll have 8-10 hours of time slots that people can come and book. And depending on what the theme of the things are or what I can bring over, then I may build a set. The cloud set that I have, the cloud room, I took to Mermagicon last year, and that was great to be able to have something more than just the swimming pool look.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Um, I had another question based off of that, and now I have forgotten what it was.
yeah. That's how it goes.
Welcome to my brain.
Yeah.
What was it? Had a whole question. Okay. I guess that question's gone. We're going to come up with a new one.
We'll come back to it. Yeah.
Right. When it hits my brain again. So, what's your plan for next year? Are you doing anything fun and exciting next year, or do you think that far ahead?
I do not think that far ahead. Yeah. That's, yeah. I ironically, my personality is a lot like water. I follow the path of least resistance. I have very
Okay.
little plan.
I like
Um,
it.
and things just kind of work out because I just relax and kind of go with it. So,
Okay.
but next year is so Hannah Mermaid and myself, we're doing these mermaid masterclasses. So
Mhm.
we are actually doing 2-day workshops for people to come along and learn how to model underwater,
Okay.
how to work with a photographer, what a photographer is looking for, how to sort of translate what each other's looking for in terms of how to
Mhm.
get that one shot, how to talk to each other.
Sure.
So we are doing more of those around the country and around the world. Um,
Okay.
so even this year, we are doing those in Taiwan in October and Australia in November, and then
So, what dictates when you go to a more remote location than where you live, like going to Taiwan or Australia?
so Taiwan, we were actually invited over there. So
Okay.
there's a group over there who've actually asked us to come over. So
Okay.
the time we're there is really just the free time in both our calendars that worked out.
Okay.
Australia is because I'm going home to see my family.
Awesome.
So it's based around that. There's kind of very little outside of summer and winter that really say when we're going to be where.
Okay. Now, speaking about seasons, like I know here, like I'm about to wrap up doing the underwater stuff because we're hitting the end of our season on this coast. How does
Yeah.
that work for you on the West Coast? Do you ever really have downtime?
Not really. I do shoot all year round, just because I have a heated pool.
Okay.
It is outside, but I can cover it, to
Hmm.
kind of keep things controlled. But I have almost a forced downtime. December and January are kind of my slowest months, just because I think people don't really think
Holidays.
about
Yeah.
holidays, but also people don't really think about having an underwater photo shoot at that time of
Sure.
year. Even though the seasons here are pretty mild, our winters can get a little chilly comparatively, and we do get a
Sure.
bit of rain. So, yeah.
Okay.
And I kind of like that. I like having sort of 2 months where I can
Makes sense.
do other projects and stuff.
Right. I remember what my question was.
Yeah,
So, do you ever shoot above water anymore, or is the only thing you do in water now?
I try not to shoot above water. Yeah,
Okay.
I can count on two fingers, I think, in the last couple of years how often I've shot above water.
Okay.
Um, and I just don't like it. I don't think I'm very good at it. I
Okay.
don't think I know how to. And even the short film we did yesterday, there were some scenes that were above water, and I hated every minute of it. It's unnatural to me, but yeah.
I mean, at least you own it.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I have people all the time who will book me for the underwater parts and then go, "Oh, can you do, would you mind DPing this whole thing?" And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
honestly, if you have someone who knows what they're doing above water, I would get them in. Yeah.
I like it. Um, is there anything running around your brain that you want to create next? Like I know you did Stranger Things, you did your cloud room, you've done your mirror room. Is there something else in the works?
Yeah, it's Halloween's coming up, so I've got to try and think of something to do for Halloween because I do a Halloween shoot every year.
Okay.
So I've been trying to think about that. I haven't settled on anything yet, but
Okay.
I have done probably the last 3 or 4 Halloween ones I've done have been quite sort of dark and scary. I think I kind of want to do maybe
Okay.
a fun, light, happy
Okay.
one, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, dark beauty is on my list of things that I do fairly often. So I always appreciate this time of year because people value it a little bit more, like
Yeah.
they absorb it a little bit more than they do the rest of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
I keep losing my questions. Oh, I know what my other question was.
Yeah.
Are you still doing your podcast?
I am. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
And my wife, just before I came in here, said, "Remember to tell them about your podcast." So yeah, I do the podcast, not as much as I was when the pandemic started.
Well, that's when you started it, right?
Yeah, and so I was
Okay.
doing an episode every week back then. Now I do one maybe every month or so.
Okay.
But it is still happening. It's called the Underwater Podcast, and I love it. And the reason that I do it is very selfish because I get to talk to amazing underwater creators, people that I respect,
Uh-huh.
and get to hear their approaches on things and how they uh, how they create and how they do things differently. So, the latest episode, which is up there now, is Jenny Balmer, and who's been a friend of mine for probably 7 years. We
Mhm.
work on a lot of projects together, but she's amazing. She's an underwater cinematographer, and she is great at what she does, and she does things in ways that I haven't thought of.
Right.
So it's great.
I'm kind of with you on that. When I started doing the lives, I found that it was really valuable talking to people because it either confirmed what I already knew or I got that extra little bit of information that made something else make sense. And you go,
Yeah,
oh, okay, now that makes sense to me.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, totally. And
like
even
when I
if it's
asked,
something
go ahead.
Even if it's something you don't agree with, I've had people who
Mhm.
who have approach that is totally different to mine, and I would never do it that way. But I am like, but you get this result from it. This is amazing.
Uh-huh.
Like
Yeah.
there's more than one way to do anything.
I always tell everybody I'm just lucky because I take a picture and I'm either going to be able to use it later or I'm not. Like
Oh
there's
no,
no
totally.
technical anything happening over here.
Yeah. I mean, most of my greatest shots are happy accidents, you know.
Right? I mean, truly.
Yeah, and honestly, that is my dogma and my approach to underwater photography is let's set out to do this thing that we've decided, but then let's be
Hmm.
open to it not working, and let's just see what happens. And so
Yeah.
many times we've been shooting, this way, and then it's okay, but then I'm like, hey, let me just see what this looks like, and I'll go this way. I'm like, holy shit, this is, oh
Hmm.
wow, that's the thing. Like even when I did the cloud room for the first time, I was like, ugh, okay, this is all right. But then
Sure.
if I turned myself and the camera in the pool, I turned about 90 degrees and shot in a different angle, and then the lighting changed, everything changed, and it was like,
Okay.
oh, okay, now this is awesome. Yeah,
That's the spot.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I catch a lot of flack because I shoot above water as well too. I don't have
Mhm.
any issue with that, but I catch a lot of flack because everybody's like, Dawn, what are you hanging from? Because I'm leaning over something, I'm laying on the floor, whatever it is. We did one where we had somebody suspended from the ceiling. So
Yeah.
there's a shot of me laying on the floor like this, taking a photo, but it's like, see what happens.
Oh no, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you get, what is that saying? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. Well, that's why when I asked you your question about, advice, the question that I asked that question pretty much of everybody is like, what tidbit of advice would you give? And every photographer that's not an underwater photographer that I have asked that question goes, don't do it. Like that's their response. Like,
oh
and
really?
that's what's so interesting about doing these lives and stuff is the fact that you see a commonality in some parts and some aspects of it, and then you switch into something else and you get that little bit of more. What I have found so far is that most photographers that are above water, we will say, have a day job. They
Right.
have whatever day job, funds, whatever it is they're trying to do. Even if they make money doing the photography, they still have some sort of a day job.
Hmm.
Let's see. We got a comment. Let's see. When you're shooting in the pool, are you in scuba gear too? Don't know if you guys discussed this yet. And that is from Sandy.
Hey, Sandy. Good question, and the answer is no. I don't wear scuba gear in a pool. I don't wear scuba gear in any water unless I don't need to come up. So, but what I mean by that is, if I'm shooting with someone at 60 feet, yes, I'm on scuba because
Sure.
we have to stay down there. If I'm shooting with someone in 15, 20 feet of water, then I'm not wearing scuba
Okay.
because I like freediving. I like being able to move around with the camera and not be sort of held back by the gear that's strapped to me.
Okay.
But the other thing is that I want to direct. I want to tell the model what's going right and what's going wrong. Because
So
if I just,
surfacing and
yeah, exactly, yeah,
yeah.
because that feedback is paramount. If I just sit on my scuba tank and sit on the bottom of the pool and just tell them to go up and down 20 times,
Mm-hmm.
I'll know from the first time they go down that the next 20 times are going to be terrible, or the next 20
Okay.
times are going to be great. So
Mm-hmm.
just because they need to change their hand a little bit or something.
Sure.
So for me doing that, I'm wasting so much time.
Okay.
When I do it on free dive, you get to talk to them one on one, and we make a plan, and then we go down, um, and we do that plan to the best of our ability. But then when we come up, I've got feedback for them. I'm like, that looks amazing. What you're doing with your hair is really good, but your toes aren't pointed. And
Okay.
maybe twist your hands this way or whatever. And then we go back down and it's even better than it was the last time. So
Okay.
being able to go up and down means that I can refine and get that image better and better.
That
And
makes
again,
sense.
that's how I get the shots that I get is by constantly giving them feedback and helping them, because a lot of people go onto the water, they don't know what they're doing and they don't know what they
Sure.
look like. They think they're doing one thing, but on camera it looks like something.
Yeah. Well, I,
So
I mean, I from personal experience, I am so absolutely impressed with the models that get it and they get it quickly.
mm,
Like they realize they have to relax and do what they do on the surface down below, and it's just like you get shot after shot and you're just like, I don't know if I could do that.
yeah,
I can
yeah.
shoot it, but I don't know if I could do that.
Well, that's one of the biggest things I teach in my workshop is I make the students be the models. Because if you
Mhm.
don't know what it feels like, if you don't know what it feels like to take your mask off and get water up your nose,
Right.
how can you empathize with someone that you're asking to do that over and over?
Yep. Yep.
And how can you empathize with what it feels like to not be able to breathe all your air out to sync properly? You know,
Mhm.
if you don't know what it feels like, it's harder for you to direct and to explain to someone quickly.
Sure. That makes sense. Since I have one of your websites up, what you have brettstanley.com and then you have underwaterphotographer.com. What's the difference between the two?
So the difference, and maybe it's not as obvious as I would hope, the brettstanley.com website is more for commercial work and my
Okay.
cinematography work. So it's a little bit more of a professional
Okay.
business to business kind of situation. It's my portfolio, but it's also here's the serious Brett Stanley. Here's what he does
Okay.
for work. The Underwater Photographer website is my retail website, I guess. That's the
Okay.
business, the B2C. This is where I'm sending people who want to come and shoot in the portrait studio. So
Okay.
Underwater Photographer is more the portrait studio, and the brettstanley.com is more the
You, the photographer.
yeah, and the commercial work. That's where I'm sending people who want to hire me to shoot campaigns
Okay.
and all that sort of stuff. Um, and same with the pricing. And it does get a little confusing for people. I get commercial work coming through and saying, we want to do a shoot in the mirror room for our swimwear campaign. And I'll be like, that great. That's whatever, five, ten
Mhm.
grand. And they're like, oh, hang
Right.
on, but it says here we can do it for 2 hours for you know
Yeah.
$1,200. And I'm like, okay.
Right.
Um, that doesn't include any commercial licensing or all
Right.
that sort of stuff. So yeah, so I think I need to make that a little more obvious, maybe, but that is the kind of the split of the two websites.
Now, okay, so I have two questions then based off of that. How did you go about learning or teaching yourself the commercial side of the business? Because it's very different.
Yeah.
Did you just do research? Did you have any schooling whatsoever for photography or marketing or anything?
No, everything I've done has been self-taught or informally taught. I
Okay.
don't learn very well in a structured setting.
Relatable.
I have to kind of hit my head against something until I get it
Right.
or break it. So the commercial stuff kind of came from my above water work, where I started
Hmm.
off being more of a portrait photographer at a portrait studio back in New Zealand, and then started getting more into the commercial stuff. And a lot of what I learned about that in terms of the business side of things was just osmosis from talking to other photographers and seeing what they did. There were some good blogs and stuff about how you do licensing and contracts and all
Okay.
that sort of stuff. It can be daunting because it is a very different world than the portrait world.
Okay.
Commercial photography is kind of scary in terms of how it's scary in terms of the numbers, in terms of
Hmm.
what you're charging. And it's also scary in terms of what you're expecting them to pay for.
Right.
So if anyone hasn't done or seen commercial work, instead of them paying like a fee to shoot with you and that's it, you do a create what's called a creative fee or a day rate to shoot the thing,
Right.
and then you sell them a license for the imagery. And things have changed a little bit, but traditionally that is, we have this swimwear, we want to create some photos for billboards in North America for the next year. And you
Hmm.
price it according to those three metrics. And there are some formulas that kind of make that up.
Okay.
Um, but then if they say we want to do those, but then we also want to do like magazines worldwide. So the more wider and the longer that they're wanting to use this stuff, the bigger
Okay.
the paycheck's going to be.
Sure. Sure.
So it gets a little daunting because you're kind of like, oh, I feel like I'm swindling these guys. I feel like I'm,
Yeah.
kind of cheating them out of stuff. But it's just how it works. It's the same with portrait photography, where you charge them $100 to come and sit down, but then you're charging them 3 to 5 grand to get some prints done.
Right, right. No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Similar kind
Okay.
of thing. Yeah.
Well, I told you I would try to keep this to 45 minutes, and
We can keep
we
going.
should. You
I'm
sure?
good.
Okay.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure. I know you've had a long week already, and it's
That's
Thursday.
all good. Yeah. It's not getting any
Well,
shorter.
what did you travel for?
What do you mean?
I think you said you were in Mexico. Is that where you just
Oh
were?
yeah, yeah. So I was in Mexico. So Hannah and I were invited down there by Jules Diver, who runs Mer Week down there. So it was
Okay.
a week of mermaids in Cozumel, doing all sorts of activities and learning and all that sort of stuff. So we were down there doing a day of workshops, sort of photo shoots for them, in amongst all of that. So we had one day where we shot 18 people in the ocean, uh, one after the other, and
Oh, wow.
that was a killer.
I'm sure.
I think my mask tan has disappeared now, but it was there for a while.
Actually, that brings up a question for me too. I know that locally we're going to have a new mermaid situation convention thing next year. It's Siren Symposium,
Mm-hmm.
and I had talked about potentially like, doing photography for the event, but you've done photography for these convention style events. How many people are you going through and then having to edit after the fact?
Oh, a lot.
I'm
So
sure.
Um, so at these conventions, I sell out most times. So, and
Okay.
that's usually 1 or 2 days of photo shoots. So, anywhere from 10 to 15 shoots, I think, over the weekend.
Okay, now is that in a day or is that across 2 days?
That's probably across the 2 days.
Okay.
I tend to not do short sessions because I feel like short sessions just rushed, and I need time to work
Okay.
with people and kind of get them to the space that I need them in to be able to get the
Okay.
shots. So I really only offer half hour and hour slots, I think, and most people
Okay.
take an hour. Yeah,
Makes sense.
yeah,
I shot with a mermaid tank couple maybe 2 months ago now. And
yeah.
I decided it's my least favorite thing and I never want to do it ever again.
Right.
But it was a learning experience. I had the
Yeah.
experience. I'm over it. But they kind of had the same thing. They had like 30, 45 in an hour. And we had done, I think we had done a 45 and then like the 30 minutes after. So it's like, let's just go ahead and take the 30 minutes. I'm glad we did. There were
Yeah.
technical difficulties with the tank and then outfits
Right.
and stuff. And you just never know. It always
No,
seems to
and
take longer than it's supposed to.
oh, totally. And that I think is one of the greatest skills that I've learned from doing this for so long is problem solving on the fly, because
Yeah,
something's always going to go wrong,
absolutely.
Um, and if you're
I call
working
it.
with paid clients, you don't have time to fuck around. Like you've kind of got
Hmm.
to you got to solve this problem right now.
I call it redneck engineering. That's what we
Yeah.
called it when I was growing up. Is well, we got duct tape. Okay,
No,
just say
no, exactly. Yeah. I call it MacGyvering, but it's the same
that
thing,
too. That's a good one too.
making something out of nothing.
Exactly. Well, I also I kind of like that for like DIY photography too, where you're like, I don't have the expensive thing that everybody wants me to have, but how can I make this with stuff I have at home?
Oh,
That's like
totally.
my
Yeah.
favorite.
That's kind of where all my stuff has started, is by finding the cheapest and the cheapest but the longest way to do something is where I kind of go. Yeah. But there's
I understand
satisfaction in that
every
for
bit of
me.
that statement.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, like I'm so satisfied with the things that I've MacGyvered or redneck engineered and that
Hmm.
worked. And I'm like, oh
Yep.
my God, I just made that thing work and it looks amazing.
Well,
So good.
so when you do like your underwater sets, how do you weight some of that stuff down? Like, do you do like the whole PVC with sand in it? Do you use workout weights, that sort of thing?
No, so what I use, mostly dive weights.
Okay,
What you don't want to do is be putting sand in your pool. So sand
sure.
doesn't weigh anything in the water. It's
Hmm.
so you're not going to take a sandbag, put it in the water, and have it weigh 20 pounds. It doesn't
Yeah, I
work that way,
gotcha.
and it's just going to make your visibility crap.
Okay.
So what I use are dive weights, or I use what we in the film industry you call them shot bags. So it's a bag of
Okay.
steel shot. So it's a
Okay.
10-pound bag of steel shot that will weigh 10 pounds under the water and hold
Got it.
everything down. So for a lot of what I'm doing is I'm getting like small 1, 2, 3 pound weights and then hiding them in things. So like,
Okay.
if there's a stereo or a lamp or a TV, then I'm just hiding weights inside stuff.
Okay.
Um, what I'm trying to do is find the thing that is going to be replicatable and fit the need well. So I
Mhm.
find workout weights and all that sort of stuff, they don't tend to work well because they're a weird
Okay.
shape. Um, and you might put them in something, but then they'll roll off as the water kind of pushes them around and stuff.
Yeah,
So
I gotcha.
um, so it is really just kind of thinking about what you're doing and finding if there's something that is a little bit more suited to it than just grabbing the first thing you can think of.
Right. What would you say was the hardest set that you have built underwater so far?
Um, so the very first set that I built, which was for the
Is that the one
Wise
with the
Blood,
stereo and TV?
yeah, no TV but stereo. It came up
Okay.
here just before, but it's for the Wise Blood album cover. It's the girl kind of in an 80s bedroom. Um,
Okay, I remember that one. Where
yeah,
what's it what gallery is that in?
that's a good question. Maybe conceptual,
Conceptual.
maybe. I don't update things
He's
very
like,
often.
I
So.
don't know. He's like, it's my website. I don't know.
No, exactly.
No,
So
it's
no,
not
it's not
there.
there. But if you go back to the homepage, I think
Okay.
it was like for one of the first
One of
slides, I think.
these. Okay.
Yeah. But the reason it was the hardest was because it was the first, and
Sure.
I had dreamt about this and I had
Okay.
planned it in my head. But then when it came to the execution of it, things didn't work how I thought they were going to.
Okay.
So
Because you
I
use
got,
real furniture and stuff too, correct?
yeah, I use real stuff as much as I can.
Okay.
And even that is, you're fighting against something that doesn't want to be underwater.
Right.
And I've gotten really good at looking at a piece of furniture and knowing whether it's going to sink or float, just
Okay,
based
this
on what
one?
it is. Not this one. Probably,
No.
I think it's probably the next one. But this
Oh, it's
one,
the one where she's like floating up, if I
yeah,
remember correctly. Okay.
yeah, it's more like an 80s bedroom. But even this one, so that recliner chair on the side there, I think I had to put 80 pounds on it to get it to even go
Sure.
underwater. Um, and it's just those sorts of things of um, you never know what it's going to do, and you never
Okay.
know how things are going to go. So I see people. It's this one here. So that's the Wise
Okay.
Blood, and you can see on that. I don't know if you can
I know. I
control
wish I
that.
could go. I can't. There's no way to control it.
Um, but even in that one, so I learnt with that one that particle board or compressed wood is
Right.
crap underwater. Like you don't want to
It's
use it
gonna warp.
because it's,
Yeah.
yeah. So we had this dresser that we put in there, and as we were putting it in, it was soaking up all the water and
Uh-huh.
swelling, and all the drawers and everything started to get sad, and
But I
it
feel
all
like
kind
it
of,
added to the composition at the same time too, though. Like,
yeah, it looked good. It kind of was like had this kind of rundown thing, which is what
uh-huh.
we were kind of going for. But getting that back out again, be- because I put all these shot bags inside all the drawers, but now the drawers are all swollen up, so I can't open them. So me and Waller, my a safety on that, we were both of us pulling this thing out whilst it's falling apart in our hands like a
Uh-huh.
cup of
Crumbling.
tea. Yeah, and then the pool, which just was full of all this crap. It took like 3 days for it to clean afterwards.
Oh geez. I can only imagine. Yeah, I had one of the models I love to work with underwater. Her name's Cassie. She had these boots that she was just so excited to wear underwater, and they were these
Mm,
like thick, like platform, like pleather boots. Well, she wasn't prepared for the fact that the sole of the boots wanted to float.
yeah,
So she was getting herself down, and then her feet were just slowly like rising back up. I think I took one of the photos and I just flipped it because her feet were at the surface of the water and she was upside down. So I just flipped
yeah,
it to make it look
exactly.
like she was standing.
Yeah.
But I get it. We've had a couple of things we've tried where I think a guitar was one of them, and then the guitar
Hmm.
was like, "Yep, nope, I don't want to do this either," and it's trying to go back up to the
Oh, totally.
surface.
Yeah. Well, I've had in the middle of a video shoot, I had a a chest of drawers, I think, that was, we had built this set for a music video, and there was a chest of drawers in the corner that had, probably 20 pounds of weight in the bottom of it, and it was
Okay.
fine. But halfway through one of the takes, it just shot itself to the surface. Luckily, no one was there. It would have knocked their teeth out. But what had
Sure.
happened was the bottom of that drawer had soaked up,
sense.
had gone, had melted basically, and the shot bag dropped
Uh-huh.
out the bottom of it, and the whole thing shot to the surface.
Oh
So
my goodness.
yeah, not a great thing.
No. Well, thankfully nobody was there, and it's just a funny anecdote now.
Yeah. But also on the other side, I did a Baroque room, which was like the white room with the
Panels.
window at the back and the
Mhm.
panels and stuff. And I had this shot with Hannah in there. So I had a 2-seater love seat on the bottom of the thing.
Mhm.
But I had this other chair that I couldn't get to sink, so I just stuck it behind me in the shallow end, and it was just floating. But as we were shooting, that chair started to float into the set behind her. And it wasn't until I was like taking the shots and I looked up and I saw this chair there. I was like, oh my God. But then I looked at it, I was like, oh, this looks like Alice down the through the looking
Rabbit hole.
glass, you know?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Furniture's flying around, all this sort of stuff. And it actually
Mhm.
made the shot in a way that I would never have even thought to do
Right.
intentionally.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love it when it's like the unexpected thing works out, like, or the unintentional thing works out.
Yeah. And that's why I
All
say like
right.
most of my stuff is unintentional.
Well, there's a value in that for sure. And
Yeah.
the worst part is that you're really the only one who knows the value in it, because most anybody else is never going to know the story or the background on the shot half the time. So,
Oh no, exactly. And I just take the credit for it. I'm like, totally, that's exactly what I meant to do.
That's
Yeah.
what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Well, that's why sometimes I'll share the like the before and after shot, because
Yeah.
so often nobody sees what the original photo looks like. They're like, "Oh, that's a pretty picture." I'm like, "Yeah, but do you know what I did to that?" You know?
No, exactly. Yeah. And even if it's nothing like structural where you've composited anything in, but it's just like
Right.
I spent so much time cleaning up that background and the skin and all that sort of stuff. And
Skin, background, some of the pools that I've shot in have just been so like yucky, murky, and it's like, am I gonna get something out of it? I can make something out of it. It's probably not gonna be my favorite, but I'll come up with something.
no, exactly. Yeah. And honestly, I have shot in some shocking pools, and have mostly made something out of it. Sometimes I've had to refund people entire
Yeah,
shoot costs because I just can't make anything out of it. But
sure.
you live and learn, and realize that building a pool in your backyard is the best option.
Still jealous you have a pool. I keep joking that I'm gonna put an inflatable pool in my living room. I'm on the ground floor. I have a ground floor condo, and I'm like,
Yeah.
nobody will know. Nobody will
Exactly.
know. I'll know,
Yeah.
but nobody will know.
Yeah. You can shoot in like 6 inches of water. It's going to be great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've reached our hour, and I promised you I would keep it short.
It's totally fine.
Thank you so much. This has been absolutely delightful, and I really
Yeah, of
appreciate
course.
the fact that you joined us and shared your story and gave us some time today.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me prattle on about this stuff. I love it. I'm obsessed
Anytime.
by it, and happy to talk anyone's ear off about it.
Well, I'll remember that in the future.
Yeah. Doesn't take much to get me started.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Dawn.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.